Cassandra Wells had always been the kind of woman who believed that love could conquer anything, but standing in the law office on Madison Avenue watching her mother-in-law Patricia Blackwood sign documents that would strip away the construction company her late husband had built from nothing, she felt that naive optimism die a cold, brutal death that matched the December wind rattling the windows 23 stories above Manhattan. 6 months earlier, Cassandra had been living what felt like a fairy tale, married to David Blackwood, the brilliant architect and contractor who had transformed his family's small masonry business into Blackwood Construction, one of the most sought-after commercial builders in New York City, with contracts spanning from luxury hotels to affordable housing projects that actually helped communities instead of destroying them. David had been everything his mother, Patricia, wasn't. Generous where she was greedy, humble where she was arrogant, and deeply committed to the idea that success meant lifting others up rather than stepping on them to climb higher. But a drunk driver had shattered that perfect life on a rainy Tuesday in October, sending David's car into a concrete barrier on the FDR Drive and leaving Cassandra not just widowed at 29, but suddenly vulnerable to a woman who had always resented her son's choice to marry someone Patricia considered beneath their social status. The 29-year-old former teacher had been so consumed with grief that she hadn't noticed the legal maneuvering happening around her until it was too late. Patricia had used her position as the original business partner and David's emotional state before his death to manipulate him into signing documents that would transfer majority control of Blackwood Construction to her in the event of his death. Documents that David had believed were just updating insurance beneficiaries and power of attorney arrangements. Now, watching Patricia's perfectly manicured fingers grip the pen that would make her the sole owner of everything David had worked for, Cassandra realized that her mother-in-law had been planning this takeover for years, waiting for the perfect moment to seize control of the company and push out the daughter-in-law she had never wanted in the family. Patricia's first act as the new owner was to fire Cassandra from her position as the company's community outreach coordinator, a role David had created specifically for her talents in working with neighborhood groups and local governments to ensure their projects actually benefited the communities they built in. But Patricia had always seen this work as wasteful charity that cut into profit margins. The second act was even more devastating. Patricia had announced that Blackwood Construction would be pivoting away from the affordable housing and community development projects that had been David's passion, and would instead focus exclusively on luxury developments and high-end commercial buildings that generated maximum profit with minimum concern for social impact. But Patricia Blackwood had made one crucial mistake in her calculated destruction of her son's legacy. She had underestimated the woman David had married, assuming that a small-town teacher turned community advocate would be too grief-stricken and powerless to fight back against someone with decades of business experience and family connections that reached into every corner of New York's construction industry. Cassandra's revenge began with research, using her background in education and her natural analytical skills to study everything she could find about Patricia's business history, her personal relationships, and most importantly, her other son Marcus Blackwood, the investment banker, who had always been Patricia's favorite child and the golden boy she planned to groom as David's replacement in running the family business. Marcus was everything David hadn't been: shallow, materialistic, and utterly dependent on his mother's approval and financial support. Despite being 34 years old and supposedly successful in his own right, what Cassandra discovered through careful investigation was that Marcus's success was entirely fabricated. His prestigious position at Goldman Sachs was actually a low-level job that Patricia had secured. Through family connections, his expensive Manhattan apartment was paid for by a trust fund Patricia controlled, and his entire lifestyle was bankrolled by money his mother funneled to him from Blackwood Construction's profits. More damaging still, Marcus had a gambling addiction that he hid from his mother, but that had already cost him nearly $200,000 in debts to people who weren't known for their patience with late payments. Armed with this information, Cassandra began the most sophisticated psychological manipulation of her life, using her grief counseling sessions and her natural empathy to position herself not as Patricia's enemy, but as Marcus's savior and eventually his closest confidant. She started by accidentally running into Marcus at the coffee shop near his office, striking up conversations about how much she missed David and how difficult it was to watch Patricia change everything David had cared about. Marcus, who had always felt overshadowed by his younger brothers' success and their mother's obvious preference for David's achievements over his own, found himself drawn to someone who seemed to understand his complicated feelings about family, expectations, and sibling rivalry. Over the course of 6 months, Cassandra carefully cultivated a relationship with Marcus that began as friendship, evolved into emotional dependence, and eventually became the romantic relationship that Patricia had nightmares about, her precious, surviving son falling in love with the daughter-in-law she despised. Cassandra's real masterstroke came when she discovered that Marcus had been embezzling money from his own investment accounts to cover his gambling debts, a federal crime that would not only destroy his career but send him to prison for up to 20 years. Instead of exposing him immediately, she offered to help him cover the stolen money using her own savings from David's life insurance policy, positioning herself as the only person in the world who truly understood and accepted him despite his flaws. Marcus fell completely under her influence, believing he had found someone who loved him unconditionally, not knowing that every conversation was carefully calculated to make him more dependent on her emotionally and financially. The final phase of Cassandra's revenge unfolded during Patricia's elaborate 60th birthday party at the Rainbow Room, an event attended by everyone who mattered in New York's construction and real estate industries. Standing before 200 guests, Marcus announced his engagement to Cassandra and revealed that he was leaving his job at Goldman Sachs to join Blackwood Construction as David's replacement, a decision he framed as honoring his late brother's memory, but that Patricia recognized as the ultimate betrayal. But Cassandra wasn't finished. She used her new position as Marcus's fiancée and future family member to systematically expose every secret Patricia had been hiding, starting with the financial records that showed how Patricia had been overcharging clients and underpaying workers to maximize profits, then revealing the bribes Patricia had paid to city inspectors to overlook safety violations, and finally presenting evidence that Patricia had been systematically destroying David's affordable housing projects by selling the land to luxury developers for personal profit. The scandal erupted across New York's business community like wildfire, with Patricia facing federal investigations for fraud, bribery, and violation of numerous construction safety regulations, while Marcus found himself under FBI scrutiny for his role in covering up his mother's crimes and his own embezzlement activities. But the most devastating blow came when Cassandra revealed that she had never actually loved Marcus at all. She had been recording every conversation they'd had for months, gathering evidence of his gambling addiction, his financial crimes, and his willingness to betray his own mother for someone he believed cared about him. The recordings became key evidence in both Patricia's fraud case and Marcus's embezzlement charges, destroying both mother and son in a single devastating legal maneuver that left them facing decades in federal prison. Patricia's final humiliation came when the judge ordered Blackwood Construction to be liquidated to pay restitution to the victims of her fraud, with the proceeds going to a foundation that Cassandra established to continue David's work in affordable housing and community development. Standing outside the courthouse as Patricia and Marcus were led away in handcuffs, Cassandra felt not triumph but a deep satisfaction that justice had finally been served for the man she had truly loved and the communities his mother had exploited. The foundation she created with the remains of Blackwood Construction has built over 300 affordable housing units in the 5 years since Patricia's conviction, each one carrying a small plaque that reads "In memory of David Blackwood, who believed that building community means building hope." Cassandra never remarried, but she found a different kind of love in the work that honored her husband's memory, while ensuring that his mother's greed and her golden boy's weakness could never again destroy what good people had built through honest work and genuine care. Sometimes the most complete revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but using their own weaknesses and selfish love to ensure that everything they tried to steal ends up serving the very purposes they tried to destroy, proving that integrity and justice can triumph even when they seem to have been buried along with the people who embodied them most fully.